Even the brightest sun must eventually face an eclipse, hiding the truth in temporary darkness. We explore those moments when life goes dark and the secrets that emerge before the light returns. Hit that subscribe button now and witness the unfolding of the hidden truth.
My son-in-law sat across from me at my own kitchen table, folded his hands like a man closing a business deal, and said, "Eleanor, we think it's time you started looking at assisted living options, somewhere with people your own age." Eleanor. Not Mom. Not even Mrs. Whitmore. Eleanor like I was a stranger he was politely dismissing from a waiting room. "I'm Nadine." "Wait, no. I'm Adelaide Whitmore. I'm 64 years old, and I want to tell you what happened next. If you're listening from somewhere across this country or beyond, drop your city in the comments. Stay with me until the end, because what happened in the 6 weeks after that Tuesday morning changed everything I thought I knew about family, money, and what it means to finally choose yourself. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I picked up my coffee cup, took a slow sip, and said, "I'll think about it." Then I walked to my garden and started deadheading my roses like it was any other morning in October. But nothing was the same after that. Let me take you back to where this really started, because you can't understand that kitchen table moment without understanding everything that came before it. My name is Adelaide Grace Whitmore. I spent 31 years working as a labor and delivery nurse at Mercy General Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I brought more than 4,000 babies into this world. I held the hands of women in the worst pain of their lives and told them they were stronger than they knew. I said it so many times that I stopped counting. The thing nobody tells you about being a labor nurse for 3 decades is that you develop a very precise understanding of what a person looks like when they're performing for an audience versus when they're telling the truth. That skill would serve me well. My husband Chester died 5 years ago. Lung cancer, though he hadn't smoked a day in his life. We had 37 years together, most of them good, all of them real. Chester was a civil engineer who built bridges for the state of Ohio. He was quiet in public and endlessly funny at home. He made the worst puns I've ever heard and laughed at every single one of them before I could even groan. I miss his laugh more than anything. We raised 2 children in our house on Clover Hill Road, a yellow Craftsman with white trim that Chester painted himself every 5 years without fail. Our daughter, Renee. And before you ask, no, she is not the problem in this story. Renee lives in Denver with her family and called me every Sunday morning, even after everything fell apart. She is the one who told me afterward that she'd had a bad feeling about all of this from the start. She just hadn't known how to say it. Our son, Marcus, is the one who handed his wife the keys to my life and watched while she drove it into a wall. Marcus is 38. He works in corporate finance. He married his wife, Gwendolyn, 6 years ago at a venue that cost more than my first house. Gwendolyn is 34, stunning in a way that seems to require significant daily maintenance, and possessed of an absolute certainty that her preferences are simply better than other people's preferences. She doesn't argue with you. She just looks at you with that patient, practiced expression. The one that says she has already decided and is waiting for you to catch up. I want to be fair to her. When they first got together, she was perfectly pleasant to me. We weren't close, but we were cordial. Holiday dinners were fine. She sent birthday cards. There were no early warning signs, or maybe there were, and I just didn't want to see them because Marcus seemed happy. The trouble started in March of last year. Marcus called on a Thursday evening. He hadn't called on a weekday in months. I remember thinking that was strange before I even picked up. "Mom." He sounded tired. "We need to talk about something." They were having financial difficulties, he said. The economy, restructuring at his firm, some investments that hadn't performed. Nothing catastrophic, he said, but they'd been burning through savings. Their mortgage on their home in Bexley was steep. Gwendolyn had taken a break from her interior design consultancy to focus on starting a family. They just needed a little time to get back on their feet. Could they stay with me? Just for a while. 4 or 5 months. My house on Clover Hill Road has 4 bedrooms. Chester's study, which I kept exactly as he left it because I wasn't ready to change it, could become a guest room. I had more space than one person needed. I knew this. The silence in that house sometimes sat on my chest like a weight. Of course, I told Marcus, stay as long as you need. They moved in on April 3rd. Marcus brought suitcases. Gwendolyn brought a moving truck. I counted 11 boxes labeled wardrobe, not including shoes. There were 4 boxes for what she called home office essentials, which turned out to be aesthetic items. Candles, specific brands of diffusers, a collection of linen-covered books she arranged on my shelves by color rather than author or subject, which is a thing that apparently some people do. "I hope you don't mind," she said, holding up one of Chester's engineering manuals. "These don't quite fit the palette we're going for." I minded. I smiled and said nothing and put Chester's books and boxes in his study. That was my first mistake, not speaking when I should have. The changes came in quietly, the way rising water does. You don't notice how high it's gotten until you're already soaked. My kitchen became Gwendolyn's domain, not because she cooked. She ordered from a meal prep delivery service that cost $400 a week, but because the kitchen was, in her words, the heart of the aesthetic experience of a home. She replaced my cast iron pans on the wall with a geometric arrangement of copper pieces she'd ordered online. My cast iron went to the garage. I've been cooking with those pans for 22 years. She converted Chester's study into what she called her creative space. I hadn't opened that room in 5 years, but somehow losing it to a whiteboard and a ring light felt like losing him again, in a smaller, meaner way. My Sundays had always been sacred. Church at 9, then home for a long afternoon with the phone off, and whatever book I was working through. Within 2 months, Sundays became family activity days. Gwendolyn's words, which meant brunches at restaurants I hadn't chosen, errands that somehow always involved her preferences, and evenings with her friends. Couples I'd never met who filled my living room and called me Adelaide, with a confidence that suggested they felt they owned the place. Marcus watched all of this and said nothing. My son, who had cried at every single school play because he was so proud of me in the audience, watched his wife sand me out of my own house like an imperfection in a surface she was trying to smooth, and he said absolutely nothing. The money situation, it emerged, was more complicated than 4 or 5 months. They paid me $600 a month toward groceries. My mortgage was $2,200. Utilities ran to $400. Property taxes were $510 monthly. Insurance, maintenance, the yard service I needed because my knees had started giving me trouble on the steep parts of the lawn. I was covering over $3,600 a month while they saved. I knew this. I told myself it was temporary. In August, 5 months in, I was in the backyard cutting back my hydrangeas when I heard Gwendolyn on the phone in the kitchen through the open window. "No, honestly, it's ideal," she was saying. "She's here all the time anyway, so it's not like she's even using the space. And Adelaide is so easy, she never says anything." A pause. A laugh. "I know. Exactly. We'll have enough by spring. And honestly, this house is so much better than what we had. If we could just get her to agree to let us buy her out at a fair price." I set down my pruning shears. I stood very still in my garden, with the smell of cut hydrangeas around me, and I heard very clearly what she had just told me. They didn't want to stay in my house temporarily. They wanted my house. I went inside, washed my hands, and said nothing, but something in me settled into a cold, clear, purposeful quiet. I'd spent 31 years in delivery rooms. I knew the difference between pain that was the end of something and pain that was the beginning. October arrived, and with it the morning that changed everything. It was a Tuesday. I came downstairs at 6:30 to find Gwendolyn already at the kitchen table with a folder in front of her. Marcus appeared a few minutes later. Both of them looked like they rehearsed this, which of course they had. "Adelaide," Gwendolyn began, hands folded, "we've been doing a lot of thinking about the future. Yours and ours." She talked about the house being too large for one person, about maintenance concerns, about a study she'd apparently already done on senior living communities in the greater Columbus area. She mentioned one called Hearthside Gardens 3 times. "They have a wonderful wellness center," she said, "and the social programming is really excellent. Bridge clubs, gardening groups, people your own age." People your own age. I was 64. I had run a half marathon 2 years ago. I still worked 2 shifts a month at the hospital because I wasn't ready to fully let go. "And the house," I said quietly. "What happens to it?" Marcus shifted in his chair. Gwendolyn's expression remained carefully calibrated. "We've actually had a conversation with a realtor," she said. "If you were to sell rather than just move out, you'd have a lovely nest egg. More than enough for her side. Chester left the house in both your names, so technically, Chester left the house to me, I said. Gwendolyn smiled. Of course, but it would be mutually beneficial if. What would happen if I said no? Silence. Marcus cleared his throat. Mom, Gwen's just trying to think through what makes the most sense for everyone. For everyone. I heard that phrase and tucked it away like a receipt I might need later. I need some time, I said. To think. Of course, Gwendolyn said, gracious now that she believed she had won. Take the week. There's no rush. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed. And then I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I opened Chester's safe. He told me about it the last week he was coherent enough to have a real conversation. It was built into the back wall of his closet, behind his hanging shirts, that I still hadn't moved because they still smelled faintly like him if I stood very close. The combination was the date of our first date, August 19th, 1983. Inside was an envelope with my name on it in his handwriting. Chester had terrible handwriting. He always joked that it was an engineer's right, but this letter was written slowly, carefully, like he'd taken his time with every word. My Adelaide, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And knowing you, it's been a while before you opened this, because you were never good at asking for help or accepting it when it was given. I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago. All those overtime hours, all those nights and weekends when I said I was finishing a project, some of that was true. But some of it was me, quietly building something for you. I didn't tell you because you would have argued with me. You would have said to spend it on vacations or the kids' college or something sensible. I wanted you to have a different kind of security, the kind you couldn't give away. The life insurance policy, $920,000. MetLife. Policy number in the folder below. Beneficiary is you, Adelaide Grace Whitmore, and only you. The investment accounts, I opened 3. Combined value as of my last statement, $540,000. The account numbers and contacts are all in the folder. I worked with a man named Robert Paulson at Baird. He's expecting your call whenever you're ready. The property on Lakeview Drive, I bought it in 2009, during the crash, when the prices made sense. It's a 4-unit apartment building. Been renting since 2011. Property manager is a woman named Christine O.C. She's been sending income to a separate LLC account I set up. I never touched that money. It's all in there. Total rental income accumulated, I can't tell you exactly, but Christine can. The rents are below market because I kept the tenants we had. Good people who pay on time. But it adds up. And Adelaide, there is a codicil to my will in here too. Read it. I had my lawyer draft it specifically because I was worried about the kids in the house, not Renee. But I worried about Marcus and whoever he ended up with. Call it an old man's instinct. This money is yours, not because I'm giving it to you, because you earned every cent of it standing beside me when I was worth standing beside, and staying when I probably didn't deserve it. Go live, honey. Really live. Somewhere beautiful. Somewhere that makes you feel like yourself again. Love always. Chester, my hands were shaking so badly I had to read it 3 times. I pulled out the documents. The life insurance declaration. 3 investment account statements. A deed to a property I had never seen. A 4-unit building on Lakeview Drive, valued by a 2022 appraisal at $390,000. I found the codicil to Chester's will. And I found something that made me sit down on the closet floor. The codicil stated, in language I did not fully understand, but understood enough, that the family home on Clover Hill Road was mine for my lifetime or for as long as I chose to occupy it. Chester had had a lawyer draw up a provision after a conversation with Marcus years earlier, in which Marcus had apparently floated the idea of the house being held in trust, eventually. Chester hadn't said anything to me. He had simply gone to his attorney. I called Robert Paulson at Baird that same afternoon. He was warm, professional, clearly relieved to hear from me. Mrs. Whitmore, Chester gave very specific instructions about how to handle your first call. He said to tell you, you are not broke. You have never been broke. He made sure of that. I could barely speak. The current value of the 3 investment accounts, Robert said, is approximately $608,000, factoring in growth since Chester's last statement. combined with the life insurance and the rental property. What's the total? I asked. He told me. I wrote it down on the back of Chester's envelope. Under $13,000, plus annual rental income of approximately $52,000, plus the house, which Zillow currently valued at $480,000. I had been worried about how I would afford property taxes while my son and his wife saved for a future that included my home. I was a widow sitting on nearly $2 million. I did not tell Marcus. I did not tell Gwendolyn. I called Renee. She answered on the first ring, which she always does. Mom, what's wrong? I told her everything. About the letter, about the money, about Gwendolyn's phone call through the kitchen window, about the folder of Hearthside Gardens brochures. Renee was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Mom, what do you want to do? Nobody had asked me that in years. I thought about it, really sat with it. I want to go somewhere I've always wanted to go, I said. And I want to let them have exactly what they've given me. I made 3 calls over the next 2 days. Robert Paulson, to consolidate and transfer the investment accounts. Christine Osei, to discuss the rental property. She confirmed $51,600 in annual rent, with $214,000 accumulated in the LLC account that had been sitting untouched since Chester died. And a travel and relocation consultant named Patricia Abra, who specialized in helping American retirees move abroad. I had found her through a Facebook group for Black women over 50 living internationally. The group had 4,000 members. I hadn't known such a thing existed. I spent 3 nights reading their posts, like someone reading letters from a life I hadn't known was available to me. Patricia asked me where I'd always wanted to go. I said the Algarve. Portugal. Chester and I had watched a travel documentary about it the year before he got sick, and he'd said, Adelaide, we're going there someday. We never went. I was going. Over the following 3 weeks, while Gwendolyn forwarded me Hearthside Gardens email newsletters and Marcus occasionally mentioned the timeline, I was doing something else entirely. I hired an attorney, a woman named Frances Okafor, who specialized in elder financial protection. She confirmed what I suspected about the codicil. She also confirmed something that turned my stomach. Marcus had never disclosed to me that he'd spoken with Chester about the house years earlier. He knew about the provision. He had to have known. He gambled that I didn't. Frances drafted the documents I needed. I contacted a real estate agent named Gerald. Not on the list, I double-checked, and listed the house as a private pocket listing. Cash buyers only. Quick close. We had an offer within 10 days, a retired couple relocating from Michigan, $495,000, close in 45 days. I signed the papers on a Wednesday afternoon and drove home to make dinner like it was any other day. Thanksgiving was 3 weeks away. I planned carefully. I cooked for 2 days. Chester's mother's sweet potato pie, her handwritten recipe on an index card so old it was translucent at the folds. Roast chicken with herb butter. Green beans the way my mother made them, long cooked with smoked turkey. Cornbread from scratch. I cooked like I was feeding a congregation, which in a way I was. Dorothy from next door came, and my former nursing colleague June, and my friend Marguerite from church, and Renee called in on video from Denver and propped her phone against a vase so she could watch dinner unfold in real time. Marcus and Gwendolyn arrived at 2. Gwendolyn had brought a cheese board from a specialty market. She photographed it extensively before anyone could eat from it. We sat down. I said grace, something about gratitude for clarity and the people who show you who they truly are. Marcus ate 2 plates and told me 3 times it was the best cooking I'd ever done, which should have been the first sign he was nervous. Over pie, Gwendolyn asked about the timeline. Had I toured Hearthside? There was apparently a lovely unit opening up in January. I set down my fork. I've made a decision, I said. The table went quiet in the particular way it does when everyone can feel something is coming. I won't be moving to Hearthside Gardens. Marcus looked relieved. Good, Mom. I think if you just, I'm moving to Portugal. Nobody said anything for a full 5 seconds. I counted. Portugal. Gwendolyn repeated it like I'd said I was moving to the moon. The Algarve. I leave December 22nd. I've rented a villa outside Lagos for 6 months with an option to buy. Mom. Marcus's voice was very careful. Are you serious? You can't afford. Chester left me well provided for, I said. Better than any of us realized. What does that mean? I told him. Not everything, but enough. The life insurance, the investment accounts, the rental property, the accumulated income. I watched my son's face move through confusion, then disbelief, then something I can only describe as the expression of a man realizing the ground beneath him was not what he thought it was. He stopped. Nearly $2 million, yes. Gwendolyn set down her fork very slowly. As for this house, I said, I've accepted an offer. It closes December 10th. The buyers take possession January 15th. That gives you both 60 days to find other arrangements. You can't sell this house. Gwendolyn's voice was very flat. Marcus's name is not on this house, I said. Chester made sure of that. My attorney confirmed it. Would you like her number? Silence. You said you'd think about options, Gwendolyn said. I did think about options, Gwendolyn said. I did think about options. This is the option I chose. Where are we supposed to go? Marcus asked. I looked at my son, really looked at him. He looked young to me in that moment, younger than he'd looked in years, like the boy who used to climb into my lap after Chester's bad days and say, Is everything okay, Mama? And trust completely that whatever I said next was the truth. Find your own place, I said gently. The way I'm finding mine. Dorothy squeezed my hand under the table. June coughed into her napkin. On Renee's phone screen, propped against the vase, I could see my daughter pressing her fingers to her mouth. I stood up, collected the plates closest to me, and went to the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Gwendolyn say, very quietly, This can't be happening. And Marcus, my son, my baby boy, said nothing at all, which told me everything I needed to know about where we were. December 10th, I signed the closing papers in Francis O'Caffer's office. The buyers, a couple from Ann Arbor, warm, funny. The wife, a former teacher, shook my hand and promised to love the hydrangeas. We have a daughter who wants to learn piano, the husband said. If you know anyone, I'll be in Portugal, I told him. But I'll send you a name. I walked out with a cashier's check for $468,000 after fees, bringing my total liquid assets to just over $2 million. Marcus and Gwendolyn moved out December 8th, 2 days before closing. He sent a text with a Bexley address, a rental. I assumed. No goodbye. No apology. Just an address I hadn't asked for. I spent my last night in the house on Clover Hill Road, sitting on the back porch where Chester used to drink his morning coffee. The hydrangeas were bare for winter but still present. I told him I was going. I told him I understood, finally, what he'd been trying to give me. I told him I was taking it. My flight left Columbus at 6:15 in the morning on December 22nd. Renee insisted on driving me to the airport. She cried. I held it together until security, and then I didn't. I flew business class. Patricia had insisted. You're 64 and crossing an ocean, she'd said. Treat yourself like someone who matters. I was starting to understand that I did. I landed in Faro on December 23rd, mid-morning, Portuguese winter sun, which is to say bright and mild and completely unlike anything Ohio had prepared me for. My rental contact, a man named Sebastiel, met me at the arrivals gate with a handwritten sign. He drove me along the coast to Lagos, talking the whole way about the village, the markets, the best place for grilled fish, the woman down the road who made custard tarts that would change my relationship with dessert. The villa was small by the standards of the word villa. 3 bedrooms, whitewashed walls, terracotta tile floors, a garden that looked out toward the Atlantic. There was a lemon tree in the yard. I stood in the doorway and simply could not believe that this was where I live now. I spent the first 2 weeks adjusting to silence of a different kind. Not the empty house silence I'd grown used to in Columbus. This was a full silence, wind, distant waves, birds I didn't know the names of. I bought a field guide at a bookshop in the village. My Portuguese was non-existent. I downloaded an app and studied for an hour every morning with my coffee on the garden steps. By week 3, I could ask for things at the market without pointing. By week 6, the woman at the cheese stall was teaching me the regional names for everything and correcting my pronunciation with cheerful ruthlessness. I found the expat community through Patricia's network, a WhatsApp group called the Atlantic Circle. Mostly women, mostly American, mostly over 50. We met for dinner once a month at a rotating selection of restaurants. The first dinner I attended, I brought a sweet potato pie I'd made from memory. The table went quiet the way only a very good dessert can make a table go quiet. "Where did you come from?" asked a woman named Cecilia from Baltimore, retired federal judge who became my closest friend in the Algarve. "Columbus," I said. "No," she said. "I mean, how did you end up here? What's the story?" So I told them, my son, his wife. The kitchen table conversation. Chester's letter, the sale, the flight. When I finished, Cecilia raised her wine glass. "To Chester," she said, "who loved his wife enough to build her an exit before she knew she needed one." We all drank. I started volunteering at a small clinic in Lagos that served the immigrant community, Africans, Brazilians, Eastern Europeans. My Portuguese improved faster than I'd expected because necessity is a better teacher than any app. I was asked eventually if I'd consider working 2 days a week as a triage nurse. I said yes before they finished asking. Marcus called in February. Late evening his time, morning mine. I was in the garden with my coffee. He didn't sound like himself. He sounded hollowed out, like something had been removed. "Gwen left," he said. 3 weeks ago. I had been half expecting this. I said I was sorry, and I meant part of it. She said I wasn't ambitious enough, that I let the situation with you embarrass her. He laughed in a way that contained no humor whatsoever. She had already been talking to someone else. Someone from her design network. Apparently it was serious. The Atlantic glittered beyond my garden wall. A fishing boat was moving along the horizon. "Marcus," I said. "Are you okay?" A long pause. "No," he said. "I'm in therapy. I started in January. My therapist says I have a pattern of, she calls it outsourcing my conscience. I let other people make decisions that I was too afraid to take responsibility for. And then I told myself it wasn't my fault." "And was it your fault?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Yes, Mom. It was mine. Gwen didn't do this to you. I did. I let her because it was easier than standing up to her, and I told myself you were fine because I needed you to be fine. Because if you weren't fine, that meant I had done something unforgivable. I watched the fishing boat until it passed out of view. Have you," I asked, "done something unforgivable?" Silence. "I don't know," he said quietly. "Have I?" "I think," I said, "that depends entirely on what you do next. Not with me, with yourself." He started crying then, which I had not heard him do since his father's funeral. We talked for an hour. I told him about the clinic, about Cecilia, about the lemon tree, about the custard tarts. He asked questions, real ones, the way he used to ask questions when he was 12 and curious about everything. At the end, he asked if he could visit. "In the spring," I said. "Come in April. The flowers are extraordinary." "I'd like that," he said. "I'd really like that." He came in April, as promised. He came alone, carrying a single bag, looking nothing like the man who had sat across from me at my kitchen table in his pressed business casual, confident that he was managing a situation that was entirely in his control. He stood in my garden for a long time without speaking. Then he said Dad would have loved this. He would have, I agreed. We visited my father's grave in Chester's memory. That is, we sat in the garden with 2 glasses of wine, and I told Marcus the full story of his father's life. The overtime, the letter, the years of quiet provision, the trust Chester had in me, even when I hadn't trusted myself. Marcus cried twice. I let him. On his last evening, we sat on the garden steps, watching the sun go down. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Go ahead. Did you ever consider not going? Just staying? Figuring it out?" I thought about it honestly. "No," I said. "Once I understood what Chester had left me, there was only one decision. He didn't leave me that money so I could spend it making other people comfortable. He left it so I could finally be comfortable myself." "I cost you years," Marcus said. "Years you could have been living." "You didn't cost me anything," I said. "Gwendolyn didn't either. If anything, that Tuesday morning in October was the most useful thing that ever happened to me. Because it was the morning I finally opened the safe. The stars were appearing over the Atlantic. Far out, the lights of a ship moved slowly toward some other horizon. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I know that's not enough. But I am. I know, I said. We sat there until it was fully dark and the village lights came on one by one below us, and that was enough. 6 months later, I made an offer on the villa. The owners, a Portuguese couple who had inherited it and lived in Lisbon, accepted within a week. We closed on a Thursday afternoon, and Sebastião brought a bottle of local wine to celebrate. Cecilia came. My neighbor, an Irish watercolor painter named Francis, came. We sat in my garden, around the table Chester never sat at, in the country he never got to visit, drinking wine in the warm evening air. I raised my glass toward the Atlantic. We made it, I said. Not to anyone at the table. To Chester. To the version of myself who had stood in a garden in Columbus with pruning shears in her hand and made a promise she intended to keep. I'm 65 years old. I own a villa in Portugal outright, with a lemon tree in the yard and a view of the Atlantic that is, on clear mornings, so beautiful it makes me stop whatever I'm doing and simply stand there. I work 2 days a week at a clinic where people call me Nurse Adelaide with a sincerity that I feel in my chest every single time. I have friends who know my full name and my whole story and love me anyway. My son is in therapy and trying, genuinely trying, and visits every 4 months. My daughter calls every Sunday. And every morning I make coffee and carry it to the garden steps and sit with the sun on my face and think about Chester, who built a bridge for me all those years ago and trusted me to find it when I needed it most. They told me to find my own place. I did. And it turns out my own place had a lemon tree and an ocean view and 30 years of my husband's love waiting in a safe I should have opened much sooner. Find your own place. I promise you it's worth looking for.